The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall. I play Hera Syndulla on Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you always.
You're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars, episode 108.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everyone, I'm Angela Sealana, aka The Bendu, and you're listening to Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. Today, we will be discussing the layers of the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 4, The Gathering Storm. Woo! So, joining the conversation today is, first of all, we have Old Ben, Mike Creavey. Hello, Mike.
Hey, happy to be here.
And also with us is the Ronin, Thomas Sanjurjo. Hello.
It's great to be here.
All right. Well, with that enthusiasm, we shall move forward into our first impressions of The Gathering Storm. You guys, what did you think?
I was going to say, I was going to join tonight by saying, I am Boba Fett, because it's like I'm losing count of how many times he says that, but and it does make me wonder. It's so different. I feel like, because Obi-Wan's going to be hiding in the Kenobi show, I feel like he'll be doing the opposite. He'll be like, I'm Ben. I'm from Sioux Falls. Like you're just trying to lay low. I really enjoyed it. I think I think there's definitely some good criticisms out there, as there should be for pretty much anything. We talked about some of that last week, but I've kind of been saying this whole time, like, as far as people just making these big, 20, 30 minute, hour and a half long, 2 hour long, whatever, just destructive kind of ripping on this show after like 2 episodes or 3 episodes. I'm like, you guys must be terrible readers.
Yeah.
It's like who gets to
chapter in the first 2 pages? I don't even know.
Right. You get to Genesis 3 and you give up. Like, good Lord. Like, there's so many things we could do as a faith related Star Wars show. But anyway, no, but I'm loving it. And as more or less as I didn't really expect what all this episode had in it specifically. Mm-hmm. It was pretty cool, but I kind of was anticipating, and I think we've seen it now, that this was a real kind of turning point and a really, kind of opening this story up. So I'm looking forward to where it goes from here.
I agree with all of that. I thought that this was a really great episode to kind of tie the past into the present for the whole story, which is really good. But then I was really impressed with the way that cyberpunk is kind of diving into this world. And that was because it's something that's always been on the fringes of talking about Star Wars, ever since Luke lost his hand and the droid had to replace a piece of it, and the talk about, Vader being more machine than man. So that's an interesting thing to throw in, because now we're getting the more glitzy side of the actual cyberpunk of it. And so if anybody's not familiar, there's a whole genre of fiction that's written around this very specific topic of at what point do we stop being ourselves and become something else. And so for them to throw it in with this modder, and we'll get to when we're talking in the episode, but Fett asks if he'll close it up, if he's going to cover up the work so that it looks like a natural stomach. And he says, why cover up all that beautiful machinery? And I was just like, that's so great. That's exactly what that cyberpunk vibe is.
Cool. Yeah. And that's got like a Japanese connection too as well, mm-hmm. Right? So also a Star Wars connection there. So my first impression was, like, by the end of the episode, I was like, man, bring it on. Like, I'm ready for the rest of this story, right? Which is kind of a miracle, honestly, because I cared very little for Boba Fett like a year ago. And like a few years ago, I maybe even like cringed at the thought of this like totally overhyped character, right? So, of course, I was just excited about the connections with The Mandalorian, which is very exciting, although not like mind blowing because we've been a little spoiled like the last few years of like how organically Star Wars has incorporated all these characters and storylines across the series. But to see and to hear those hints at Din Djarin and The Mandalorian was really gratifying and kind of amped up my anticipation for the direction that this series is taking. So, yeah, cool. So let's get into our deep dive.
One more before we go too much further. I wanted to talk about the music because I have been like sitting on the sidelines about this. I didn't want to say anything because I was like, okay, maybe it's not that big a deal. But I have not had a real sense of the theme of Boba Fett. Like, The Mandalorian, like I was humming that theme for days after watching.
I was humming it today.
I know, right? So it gets stuck. And I have not had that with the Boba Fett theme until this episode. And it was the goofiest thing that, Angela and I were talking about it before the show, like why this might be. But I can just imagine Van Gorsen sitting there thinking like, what am I going to do with this music? What am I going to do? Boba Fett. But like just mantra humming Boba Fett and sitting in his wall of machines, like manipulating it. And then this week it came out, right? Because in the middle of one of the scenes, you hear this Boba Fett. And that's it. And now the theme is completely stuck in my head. And all I have to do is think Boba Fett and the whole theme just spills in. So I was like, that's it. Did it for me. We're good.
So he must have like seen the footage, right? Like before he was actually creating the music for the episodes, right? So maybe it was just like the constant repeating of his name that kind of inspired the motif.
That's what it was. There we go. Now we tied it all together. Who is he? He's Boba Fett.
He's very emphatic about telling people who he is, which is in and of itself interesting, given all of the identity themes that we've been discussing on this show, right? Okay.
Well, and he doesn't have the armor. Like when he said to Fennec at the one point, like without my armor, I'm less persuasive, but he's also less recognizable. Like they see him before, like, oh yeah, that guy. So it's got to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so let us begin with the Back to Dream, shall we? Going back to the Dune Sea. See what I did there? Nice. Going back to... Anyways,
I do.
I don't know why. My priest made a dad joke in the homily today, and I guess it just rubbed off on me. So Boba, he has his eye on Jabba's palace, scouting out the security situation. And then we get some fireside dining with Boba and his bantha. Which I guess now we know they can eat meat. I was kind of wondering, what do banthas eat in the desert?
I think they'll eat anything they can, right? You're a desert animal. It doesn't matter.
I love the puppeteering on it. I'm so happy it's not CGI.
Yeah, it's so great. It brings a lot of character to it too. And suddenly there's this explosion over the ridge, and we hear the single musical motif that we've come to associate with The Mandalorian. And so this was already like, for me, I was like, oh my gosh, wow. So what were you thinking like when that actually happened? Were you anticipating what we were going to see? Did you remember that scene from, I think it was chapter 5?
I had a feeling that we were in that moment where he goes to pick up Fennec, because, we talked a lot at that point about who that was. And, at the end, it's revealed that he's around, but we still didn't have that direct association until the later season when Fennec shows up with him.
I think too, it cued it pretty quickly when I saw those flares, remembering, how Mando and what was his name? Toro, I think. Calican, or how they, were doing that to blind Fennec so she couldn't spot him when she's sniping him. And I was like, oh, cool, okay. But I got a little hung up because there's two big questions I had in this episode that are not so much a criticism as a genuine, like, I'm wondering, because the timeline passage here is still a little confusing for me. I'm going to have to kind of rewatch a few times. It seemed a little clearer second time, because it seems like I just wonder, I don't know how long he's with them before we got to the actual, welcoming him in and the train and all that. I was thinking a few weeks or months.
The Tuscans.
But then, but then we pick up where like he's going in to meet up with the Pikes, and it's not like that's been going on for a while. That's like right after the train thing, because there's then this dispute, right, about protection. But then he goes home that day and they're all dead. And then the next time we see him, here he is with his bantha and he's checking out Jabba's palace. So I don't know how long he was with them versus how long he was by himself, repeatedly going back to Jabba's palace to go. I mean, it must have been a few years even after they all got wiped out. Because again, we know that Mando season 1 is 4 or 5, I think 5 years after Return of the Jedi. So that was just something I when I saw it, I kind of knew what it was, but then I was like stopping for a second, like, wait a minute, I thought we still had a ways to go, but there they are. So
yeah, I think we're meant to assume that he was with the Tuscans for quite a while. I mean, I think last episode we talked about how he was taught their martial art, and you can't really master that in like a year, I mean, so it probably took a while, and honestly, like for them to trust somebody probably took a while.
Sure.
Build those relationships to where he was, when he was burning their bodies. So, I think that's a good chunk of time. But then also you're right, like just wandering the desert, probably that was a good amount of time. I mean, he's probably got to come up with some kind of plan, right? He's been planning, how can I get into that palace, right? How can I get my ship back? Where's my armor? Just all these things are probably going through his mind. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my assumption there. But so we see this other scene with Fennec Shan's body lying in the sand now from the perspective of Boba on the Bantha. And I did go back and watch Mando Chapter 5, The Gunslinger, where an unidentified figure comes up to Fennec and kneels down to her. And the thing is that scene clearly has the sound of metal spurs, like with every single step. And we did not hear that this time. I think
that kind of electronic whirring kind of.
It was like
there's like some sort of.
Yeah.
Or like it's like a radio frequency kind of thing almost. Yeah.
Yeah. In Chapter 5 of Mando. And so I just kind of wonder how maybe like Dave Filoni would kind of canon explain that. If he would say like, well, this is Boba's recollection of like what happened, or what we saw before was actually not Boba and it was somebody else just kind of looking at her. And I don't know. I'm curious about that.
Do you think it's part of the music? I'm doing huge air quotes right now. It's not, but I mean, like, I wonder if that's like, it's part of the audio track. It's a cue. I don't know. But yeah, I wondered the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, I was waiting for the spur sounds. I was like, oh, maybe he's got spurs, right? It would have made sense. I'm not sure why they didn't go back.
Yeah, you're writing a bantha.
Throw this in.
Yeah, Tuscans don't need spurs. I guess not.
Yeah, but also like, where would he get spurs from? Unless they made them, the Tuscans. But anyway, that was all interesting.
I'm sure banthas can go a little faster than they look, but I don't really anticipate like you get on a bantha and it's kind of just lumbering through the dunes.
Well, okay, so that's when we get the title card and we learn the title of this chapter. And then we see Boba riding to the outskirts of Mos Eisley at night with Fennec in tow. And we come to what I first thought was like some kind of nightclub or something.
It looks it. It definitely does.
There's several young humans, again, humans only, right? Standing outside of this facility here, and they have several mechanical implants. What were you guys thinking during this particular moment? Like, did you anticipate what this place was? Did you, based on what we had seen maybe before, or even based on what we saw in those young people outside? Like, also, what do you just think of this whole, bringing into canon the, as you were saying, right? Like this new addition. I mean, it's kind of new that the young people are just doing this for fun or for kicks or whatever, getting these implants.
Yeah, it's definitely a different take on Star Wars, because it's always been a medical necessity that that has been going on. And so this in cyberpunk parlance, we call this guy a Ripper Doc. He's like a shady guy that just does implants for people because they want them, not necessarily because they need them. And so it gets into that realm of like of plastic surgery, where what is the limit of modifying yourself, and how does that affect you as a person, and where do you stop being human and start being machine? So I love that. I don't know that it's interesting, because it's not something we've explored fully in Star Wars before. It's always just been a sidebar to something else. So Grievous was a cybernetic creature that had been built by Sidious, and that was like kind of his shtick. And then you have Vader, who's also the same thing. You have Luke has to question his relationship to his father based on that last moment when he cuts his hand off, and it's a mechanical hand that's there. And so we've had a lot of like external tangential references to it, but never really a direct one that says like what is the limit of this. And it's also interesting that it's just the humans that are doing it, and that seems to be kind of the push that they're going for, is that this is a very human thing, not something that any of the other species in the galaxy are doing.
Yeah, and I don't really want to, from my side, open up too much of a can of worms, just because we could have a whole, I think theologically, we could have a whole very interesting conversation about this, as far as where is that line? Because like on one hand, if even medically, but at what point, I mean, we're all about the incarnation, right? And at what point is, you hear people theorizing about transmitting your consciousness into basically some sort of network or a hard drive or God knows what else, to then possibly, reanimate it later, or just like, are you still you out there if you're disembodied? And this is not easy stuff to figure out. I mean, we know that it can't, if you go down that road to that level, it's starting to get potentially a little dangerous, at least iffy. What's funny, this should come up, is because I just today was rewatching a little WandaVision. For no real reason in particular, and I just happened to come across the scene with Vision and Vision ? And they have the ship of Theseus discussion. And so as soon as Thomas this morning, I was like, or right at the beginning of this episode, I was like, yeah, it's kind of like that. If you keep replacing the planks of the ship, when does it stop being the ship it was? And it's a very intriguing thought experiment. So but my thing with them is I think they're cool. I just, like I said this to Angela and Andrew last week, I don't know if it's a casting thing or what, but like none of them are intimidating to me. Like I wish some of them were intimidating, and I'm not some macho guy or something.
They're young people.
I guess
though.
not. Well, well, I guess
rebels.
These ones are right. I think it was last week more, because we sort of got this window into this culture through like this gang that he hires to be his sort of enforcers, and all the debate about that aside. But I did have to laugh though, because when we were panning this crew, for some reason, I don't know who played him, but the guy that had the two, like the kind of goggly eyes that were like glowing, I got a real Kyle Mooney vibe off him from Saturday Night Live. He really looked like him. I don't think it is, but that was kind of funny. I was just like, is that Kyle Mooney? I don't think so. But it was kind of interesting to definitely like the idea of taking her in there. And I really loved how that exchange goes, because Boba, like, the only emotion he's really shown so far is when he's like the memeable like a bantha thing, right? With the big smile on his face, But he's usually just so like completely like chill and silent, and everything. And he takes her and lays her down, and he's just like goes over with the money, and he's like, she's dying. And he's like, you should have started with that. And he's just so casually going and repairing her. And I just thought it's funny, it's maybe Luke's, I don't know what Luke felt about these mods, right? So maybe he lucked out that he got a droid to do his hand, because he would have woken up like, what is this? So.
Well, and I think that's the thing.
I didn't ask for diamonds. No,
it's the difference. It's the difference between because their mods are very visible, like they're very external and showy, whereas
they're not like utilitarian.
Exactly. The intention of the other ones is to make a prosthetic that's as much like the real thing as possible. So even Luke's like you can poke it and he feels it and he can react to what's there just like a regular hand. And so it's interesting because like this is very much a different culture from your typical Star Wars. And they did a good job. Like I thought they did a really good job of making this distinctly unique because it's very colorful. It's very like you said, it almost feels like a nightclub that these guys are going to this nightclub to get their mods, you know. And one wonders where they get the money for these things, but because they don't have any jobs, but
they steal stuff and then they sell it. that's what it seems to be.
So, but it's very cyberpunk. Like it really is. It definitely fits that that kind of cyberpunk genre. It's not as gritty as the cyberpunk can be, but the neon lights and the that sort of drug kind of feel to it, where it's like, you know, underground, and you're doing it on the low, and you got this guy who's kind of sketchy. You're not sure whether or not he's great at what he does, but he's got the neat hand that helps him do it.
It is an amazing hand. And the character is actually credited as the mod artist. So apparently he is actually played by Grammy-winning musician Thundercat. And he and his brother were both in a punk band called Suicidal Tendencies, but he is mostly known for his jazz-influenced music. And actually, he's done a project, a song with Childish Gambino, a.k.a. Donald Glover, a.k.a. Lando. So
it was a Lando reference.
Yeah, so that's
now
cool.
Now I should have bought the Lando action figure that we randomly saw at Walmart tonight, but I'm like, my daughter's like, Lando? I'm like, well, that's cool. But I was like, no, honey, we'll just put him back. I was like, I'm not paying $12 for a Lando figure. But no, I should have.
Yes, this is your sign that you messed up. No.
That's right.
Oh. But so very interesting, yes. And Boba just kind of, says, oh, she needs modification, just like you were saying. But he does it. He gives her the mechanical gut. What I assume is a mechanical gut, because Boba later says you had a shot to the gut, right? So, and then we had seen her reveal that in the Mandalorian series. I just wonder, like, how does it work? But it's Star Wars, right? So,
don't think too much about it.
But in a purely fictional world, just for fun, like if you went to a mod parlor, like what would you have modified?
Oh man,
what kind of modification would you get?
I wasn't ready to. Oh.
Or would you even do it?
I am a purist, and I wouldn't. I actually wouldn't. I have thought this is one of my favorite genres. So I have been exploring this ever since I was a teen. Like I've played games, watched shows, played tabletop games around this, and you inevitably get to the question of where do you stop? Like, what is the end? And because I mean, if you could just put your brain into a car, and you were the car, would you do it? And I have friends that honestly have answered, like, after a lot of thought about it, yes, I would absolutely 100% put my brain into a car. Like,
wow.
No questions asked. And so that's, I wouldn't go down, I wouldn't start down that path personally.
I was going to make a joke that when I'm on the road, at least lately, last couple of years, it seems like there's a lot of, we could use some more brains in cars. At least sometimes of day. I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm with Thomas on this one. It's, I think I'd be more inclined to see it as more of like the functional sort of medical kind of thing. If I did have to pick, I'd probably pick something that would enhance my right wrist, which I overuse and had this tendonitis and it's all messed up and it's taken forever to heal. So if I could, I don't want some big hulking thing like he had, but just like a brace type thing that looks cool. So it can look cool and help. I don't know. Maybe not overstrain it.
Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, I guess when you do the modification, it does serve some kind of function. That's what it seems like.
Well, yeah, they do stuff. Yeah, I guess they're not like completely just for decoration.
It's not just purely aesthetic, right?
Well, I mean, it could be. I could add wings.
I guess
that
it
didn't work, but they just looked cool, or
Yeah, I guess we haven't seen all of the iterations of modification yet. But yeah, me personally, like I don't even paint my fingernails, so like I can't see myself getting a modification. But I just thought it'd be fun to ask. And so Fennec wakes up and Boba fills her in, what's happened. And he reveals his identity, as we've discussed, he does many times. And he insists on her drinking a black melon, which apparently takes getting used to, but with time you start to crave it.
By the way, Andrew, just real quick, did you see, I swear, like a little chill came over her when he said his name. And like, I haven't seen Fennec like remarkably at any moment, like she didn't like shake, but when he said, "I am Boba Fett," she's like looked a little apprehensive. And then,
she seems a little stressed.
She's like, Boba Fett's dead, and like tries to get it back.
And I was like, situation. Like she just woke up and some random stranger is here.
But she's no withering violet. You know what I mean? Like she is like absolutely this intense, this killer even, and then she hears his name and she like shudders a little. Like that gives him some cred.
Yeah, that's a good observation there.
It's cool.
Which he then completely wastes for the rest of the episode.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She holds her own. Yeah. Like, it's so snarky with him. It's hilarious.
It's great. When he tries to chase that rabbit pod.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when she gets used to him, it's kind of like, whatever. No, but yeah, but in the I like the conversation between them throughout the episode. But so he reveals his identity, what happened to him also this last few years, and what led him to leave bounty hunting, and that he knows who she is, and he wants her help in getting his ship back from Boba's palace. And so Fennec agrees in exchange for her freedom and helps him scout the palace by using this cool droid. We've seen something like that, at least in animation, right? Yeah.
But before we go there, I want to talk about one of the things that I think is really important in this scene that could get left out. And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And it's kind of a weird tie-in, but it works. So a life debt is a very prominent theme throughout Star Wars. So you have Chewie has a life debt to Han, that they become friends, and it's not really a debt anymore. It's just that they're really good friends. But that's the reason that they are together, is because of this life debt thing. And Life Day is this celebration that is prominent in now the canon of Star Wars. And it's goofy in its origins, but I think we can really seriously look at, outside of the religion of the Jedi, there is a very serious galaxy-wide understanding that if someone saves your life, you owe them really big time. And a lot of people will be like, well, yeah, of course you do. But that's not necessarily the case in our world and our societal norms. It's not even the case in many religions that you just owe someone your life or your servitude if they save your life. And so it's an interesting look into the psyche of everyone in the Star Wars galaxy when you have this very immediate, a shady character like Fennec Shand, who is suddenly in debt to Boba Fett and isn't looking for an opportunity to run away from him, but is looking for an opportunity to pay off that debt and to get out of it. And that's really, like, there is some deep religion culturally or socially going on there that's a lot bigger than just, well, I owe him my life now, of course. Because it's not, it's not necessarily the case that we see in our world, that people don't necessarily feel like that. So it's a cool look at like Star Wars psyche.
Yeah, very cool. I like it. And so now is kind of a good time also to pause and talk about Jabba's palace that we got to see a whole lot of in this episode, a lot more than we had seen in the past. What were you hoping? I know once we started this series, we knew we were going to see more of Jabba's palace, and we were hoping that we were going to see more of. So is there still more that you want to see? And what did you think of what we have seen so far? Because personally, I feel like we've seen kind of Jabba as this mighty overlord, like mob boss character, but we only saw a very small portion of his place, and kind of what backed that up, so to speak, and now I feel like I can see more of the wealth that is behind that. And so that kind of informs more about Jabba, like the character, right? So I don't know what you guys feel like, if you feel the same way, or just what you thought of the palace so far.
I wondered if he has other holding pens and areas and stuff like that, because Fennec used the word earlier, menagerie, right? And if you had spoken such insolence, and as far as we know, there was just one Rancor down there. Now we have a new one, but what else was there? Did he have Rathtars around, or God? I don't know. It's interesting. I think it'd be kind of cool if, now I guess the climate wouldn't work, but what if you had like a Wampa room? Because I still can't believe that we haven't seen more of those at some point that I'm aware of in Star Wars. Like, you've seen so many other things, but so yeah, I was wondering about that a little bit. Like, it's like this was basically a hangar. There's clearly like, I don't know, like barracks types. Like those guards are all coming out of somewhere. But yeah, I mean, there's got to be a visual scenario that'll develop after this as well, so
well, and it's been in some video games, so you could go in Star Wars Galaxies. There was a place that you could go, it was Jabba's palace, and you could go inside and visit some of the things that were there. So this is new. This is not any of those, at least that I've seen. So they held on to a few tiny details from it, but for the most part they have made kind of a new layout, and this is more canonical than the video games tend to be. So here you go. This is Jabba's palace. I'm intrigued now to see a little more of it and see how it fills out. I really want to know where exactly this throne room that he sits is, because it didn't really get explored in this section, because they were just trying to find the guards and figure out how to get the ship out of the hangar.
Right. Yeah. And what is Fennec's not barracks, but where's her like room? Where does she hang out? Does she have like a full suite, or like, she just kind of comes out when Black Chrysanthemum's, wreaking havoc. And it's like, how far away is her room? So yeah.
I still feel I'm laughing still about that scene, and Boba the whole time just like thinking, where I pay guards for what? But what do you guys think about, like, along the same lines as when you said about the throne room? Because I'm thinking, like, that made me think of Bib, and I don't know if I missed something. This is another one of those questions, but like when he says to Fennec, like right before they go in, about how he wants to basically get back at Bib for what do you say, for double crossing me?
That's not Bib though. He's talking about the Pike. Yeah, I had to rewatch that because I was
he's talking about pig.
He's talking about the Pike Lord.
He says
that bloated. Doesn't he bloated pig or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but he's talking about the Pike Lord that double crossed him with the biker gangs.
I don't know, man. I interpret it as
that would make more sense. Because
when he says bloated pig, I mean, and you look at how how Matt Wood looks in the Bib Fortuna suit. It's just, I don't know. That really, that says bloated pig much more to me than.
But Bib didn't really double cross him. Like, he ended up in the Sarlacc pit from his own,
right?
That we know of. I mean, who knows what's gone on? Maybe they were dropping that as like there's some other storyline that happened while Jabba was on the throne that happened.
Yeah. Because I think I wouldn't flat out say that, like, I'm confident there will be no more flashbacks, but I agree with those who've been pointing out that, like, at least the way the show's designed, like, the mechanism they've been using for flashbacks seems to be over with the specific, like, you are now fully healed,
yeah.
So I mean, it's not like you don't have memories or flashbacks other ways, but it would be different. So yeah, I don't know. I was just a little confused about that. I'll have to go back and double check that too. Or just wait till Wednesday.
Because then she mentions a name afterwards. So she responds to him with a name.
So yes, I'm getting to that. Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yes, no, it's all good. So when we're outside the palace and Boba, he says goodbye to his bantha and all that, which was really cute. Go make bantha babies. And then they're preparing for their mission, and so Boba reveals he wants to kill this person, and then Fennec responds, asking if he wants to head a Gatra. And so I looked that up. It has a capital G. And so apparently we have actually heard this word before in The Mandalorian, but it was really like just a random reference, just passing. So do you remember that one-eyed gangster who organized like the gladiator matches?
Yeah.
That Mando went to go see.
Okay.
John Leguizamo.
Yeah, exactly. So he said he swore on his Gotra or Gatra. And so apparently Gotra is a word from the Hindu culture, and it refers to a family line. And so Star Wars seems to be adapting that to mean like your house or your tribe or your, you know. So when Fennec is asking, so you want to head a Gotra, that's what that means. It's like you want to be head of a house, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So
cool.
Yeah. So Boba seems to be revealing that the Tuskens kind of taking him in, because he talks about this at this moment, taking him in and making him one of their own really changed his mind, his like the course of his life almost. That was the impression that I got kind of just from this whole, you know, the whole episode really. So yeah, it's just all the themes of family and like, you know, being a father and having, you know, losing his father and all those things seems to be all kind of tying up into this idea of a Gotra or a Gatra.
Well, I love that line. You can only go so far without a tribe.
Without a tribe, yeah.
He said something like that. I mean, that's...
And I feel like
big.
that's kind of a theme of his life, too, right? Where he wanted that. He wanted a family. And with the bounty hunters, he never ended up getting that because they always just kind of treated him as their mascot at best and just the gopher at worst, and definitely double crossed him whenever they could. And so now I think he's kind of come to the point where he's like admired the leader of the Tusken tribe and the way that family worked out. Now he realizes, well, if I want this, I need to make it for myself. And that's where he's moving.
That's awesome. I really like it. Yes, and we'll talk about that more in that particular portion there. But here we are storming the castle. You know, from pop culture, every castle has a sewer grate, right? That's where you break in.
no one defends it. Look, that's how David got into Jerusalem. So it's not. It's like
it's not an unreal proposition.
No,
I mean, you hired
yeah.
sappers and trained them in
Exactly.
ancient warfare. So
yeah, they did it in the Battle of Helm's Deep. So
exactly, yeah, this was very similar.
Yeah,
but they end up in the kitchen. Very cool droids that we see. I heard someone refer to the kind of chef droid as like the discount General Grievous.
Yes, with all the plates.
Gosh, that was so funny.
But my favorite was the LEP droid, LEP, the service droid, the mouse catcher. Yeah, we've seen that in the Clone Wars, and I just thought it was so cute.
I love it when the droids hum. That's one of my favorite things that they do when they just like walk.
Was it EV9? I'm not having in front of me here, but the one that was originally like in processing 3PO, and the voice was so dead on. But I love that like now he's on kitchen duty now. And I think there was a similar style droid, same model, if I'm remembering correctly, in Mando in that episode 5, running that bar, right? The Tatooine cantina.
Oh, really?
But it wasn't the same one. It was a similar style, I guess. But this was, I think they confirmed this was the same one. It was like, you know, our last protocol droid, well, you know, he got upset with him and disintegrated. So it's like, yeah, I guess he was also not on the sail barge. So good for him.
Yeah, and this poor little guy turns himself off when Boba's like,
funny.
do you know who I am? That was crazy.
Dude, he came in with the little net. It was like the funniest thing. Awesome. to get rats. I love it.
Yes, so they make their way over to the fire spray, where it's being held. And well, they get through a couple guards in the process. So the alarm gets set off and all that good stuff. What did you guys think of this action sequence, the retrieval of the fire spray? Did you feel like it was all that it should have been? I enjoyed just seeing him and Fennec really kind of bonding, through the action.
I like how they're giving him a lot more foibles and kind of humanity in this, because I think the thing about Boba Fett is like he can only be awesome for so long, and then at some point you gotta like tone it down and say, okay, no, but he's really like he has struggles too,
Yep.
And they're doing a good job of throwing that in with this.
Well, look, he hasn't it's it's his ship, it's his father's ship. There's a whole legacy. I love that shot. Like he got a little just barely misty-eyed enough for there to be emotion, but not like it would be a destiny fallacy if you have Boba Fett there like falling to his knees and bawling his eyes out over the ship. Like, no, that's not it. But I because we of course know that, as fans, I think people who haven't, I don't know how many people are watching this who haven't watched before, but they do need to keep some of that in mind. And I always think that's a challenge. I think we don't normally, like, we forget about that a lot. I know I do. And every now and then it hits me. I'm like, you do need to make these shows good on their own too, because that line of like someone's watching it like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, well, that was something that was in a comic book on page 50. It's like cool, but like, it's kind of cheating almost. But I thought that was neat, just his emotional reaction. And then he hasn't flown in years. He's and it's pitch black. He's trying, so I thought that was neat. The idea of like, difficult to get out of here, But and I love that shot with Fennec too. I don't know if someone else was going to mention that, but the beat there of like the timing of her getting in the ship, shooting, and then the closing of the door, like that was just such a great cinematography there on her. It was really awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Thomas, you have anything else?
Yeah, well, I love the way that she's filling out the role. I think that she brings so much character to this role that's, without her it wouldn't be, and she really sells it so well. And that's one of the things that I think is so great about both of these actors, that you have two actors who are very dedicated to making the character that they play come alive on the screen, and the whole world around them comes alive because of that. And watching them do it is just incredible and amazing. And like you were saying, Mike, it's a great show on its own. It really is. Like you're learning about this character that we all know about, and we know more about him from everything else that's going on in the galaxy than from him. So it's good to kind of get his perspective. But at the same time, it's like a really compelling show about it's a coming of age tale almost, in a weird way, because he's in his 50s at this point, but he's finally like coming into his own, and we're watching that happen. And the way that both of these actors can sell that is just intense and really great.
Yeah, like, the relationship level is being explored between them. And I'll get into more of that in a bit. But, in the cockpit right here, in this moment where, he's like, oh, where do you want to be dropped off? And she's like, where are you headed? And, I've got a few scores to settle. I'll go for the ride. That was just very like, all right, that's it. That's the relationship. It's almost like, Han and Chewie, like now we have Boba and Fennec, and they're almost
next time,
like,
don't touch my buttons.
Yeah.
That was so funny.
that was great.
But it's like, they come in a pair. Like now, I feel like, how can you have Boba without Fennec now? They're together, they come together. That's how I feel anyway.
Who's going to be Mando's foil now that the Baby Yoda is gone?
I know. We shall see.
Maybe the little rabbit droid.
All right. So the next scene was pretty intense, right? The Nikto Striders just cruising through the desert. And here comes Boba Fett massacring them all. Wow.
I think he knows. Like, I don't even think Fennec needed to say it. He knows it wasn't them. I think he's just like, he's got to unload a little bit, or he's not, I'll put it this way, he's not certain it's them.
Mm-hmm.
But right. I just like this, you know, for those who might, yeah, and I was just thinking for those who might be agreeing with Fennec there a little bit, because that's early on with the whole like the Tuscans made you soft, you know, and there's been some of that, you know, like, oh man, I saw a meme online that was funny. It was actually from when Mandalorian season 2, you know, was going on, and it was like a quick little shot of like all these really cool things of him from Empire Strikes Back, and then all of a sudden, you know, it just shows him just absolutely getting the crap beat out of him, you know, by Sasha Banks in that bar scene. And it had like Looney Tunes music playing over it. But I was like, well, how do you feel now? Because here this dude, you know, like the look on his face creeped me out. Right. It's just like target practice, you know, just.
Yeah, I said to my husband at that moment, I was like, this should quiet all those people online who were like, Boba's too soft in this show. Yeah. Yeah, it was a little bit disturbing. And I think that was kind of, you know, part of what they were trying to get across is like, this guy's got a lot going on inside, right?
Yeah.
He's not a hero.
Yeah, he's not a hero. He's the daimyo of a gang.
Well, he's a crime lord.
People will fear him one way or another. It's going to happen.
He was actively trying to kill Han Solo. Come on. You know, or was he shooting at Luke? I forget it, but still, he was trying to kill our heroes. You know, don't forget that.
Yep. So much complication here. And then we fly over the wreckage of Jabba's sail barge near the Sarlacc pit. And that's where Boba apparently thinks he'll find his armor. And, you know, guys, I had to kind of like think this through for a while because I was like, okay,
I'm
obviously
still stuck.
He doesn't know that the Jawas got his armor, right? I know that, right? But he probably like losing consciousness. Like he also forgot that he crawled out of the Sarlacc pit wearing his armor, like
in his armor. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, that whole experience must have been like really psychologically intense and just like, you know,
like
for him to forget
he didn't lose
that.
his boots, you know, but everything that was part of the armor is still, yeah. So I just kept thinking like, that's the last place he saw it. Like that's my typical, like I'm trying to find something I lost, right? Like where's the last place I saw it? I know I had it at the Sarlacc pit. Yeah. So that's where like I crossed the line. I'm like, well, I'm good with that now. I was like, go to the last place you know you had it. So,
but he's pretty intense about trying to look for it in there.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, did anybody expect him to go in twice to the thing? That was cool. No
apparently
one goes
in Legends
twice.
he falls in twice. So,
oh, does he?
Yeah. I don't know if this was a nod to that, like having him go back down. But yes, the seismic charge from Fennec, the fun of that sequence was great.
What did you guys like too, by the way? I love how like somebody pointed out that the canonization of both versions of the Sarlacc almost because of those who criticized the beak thing in the special edition. And now it's like, well, it's down in there.
Right.
I was like, there it is. Perfect. Yeah. It's like, that was so cool.
It was really cool to see. And it was animated so well. And so, yes, Boba crawls down and I like how when he comes back up, he's like covered in this acid, right? And I think Ming-Na Wen's acting choice at this moment, like she's like, your armor saved you from this acid. Like, what are you doing? You're burning in acid right now. It kind of like reminded me of like a mom like cleaning off one of her kids after like this bad rough and tumble, you know, like what were you thinking? Like,
how many times have I told you?
That's or my wife, like,
yeah,
what you did? What? Oh gosh, come here.
Yeah, it's like you need to find it back to tank. So, yeah, I've kind of mentioned it over the last couple episodes now, but I mean, are you guys picking up on these mom vibes from her, like as like an intentional acting choice? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's some of the best action hero females are they put those mom vibes into what they're doing. You know, you go back to the original Ripley from Aliens. That was, you know, that was her thing in Aliens, the second movie. She was 100% mom, and that's what made her so awesome. So yeah, I don't think that's a bad choice at all. And I think you have to really remember that they're playing the family angle on this. So he's the dad, she's the mom.
That's true.
They're really going full bore into that concept.
Yeah.
So. It's good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and like even this next scene where they're like around the fire and they're talking some more. Actually, I'll get to this, but I think it's kind of like a marriage proposal. So, so they're talking about like why he wants to lead his own house, and he's like, how often have you taken a job where that was avoidable? And if they had just like thought more, like how many lives could have been saved, how much money could have been saved, all that. And he's like, I need brains, I need muscle, and you've got both. And he said he'll give her loyalty to protect her with his own life. And so to me, like I'm watching this, and I don't know if it's because I'm a female or whatever, but I was just like, this is kind of like, there's no romance like, that we're getting from them, on screen that we're seeing. But it is like a marriage proposal in a way, saying like, I will protect you with my life. You're amazing. You're awesome. And like, I want you on my team, like I want you in my house.
Well, I don't know how they pull off like the two of them. To me, it sort of depends on the scene and the context. I get sometimes like a funny kind of like old married couple sort of thing. So like, so not some sort of like budding, like, just over the top romance thing, but like a really like, it's like they've known each other for years. But then also, and I think people will know what I'm getting at with this. It's not meant to sound weird, because at the same time, a lot of times I get a real sort of like brother sister kind of, like the two of them, just this, it's just a great team. And I don't know how,
it's a partnership.
And Father Andrew, I apologize again. Here I bring up episode 2 again, twice in a row, but I think you would agree with me out there. I have truly like great things to say about Hayden Christensen. But I just like all the debate about over the years of just like, again, that chemistry, at least in episode 2 between him and Natalie Portman. That's just a great example of where it's very, very difficult. Like when it's done well and when it's right, it clicks and you don't even think about it. And if it's not just right, it just doesn't drive the story maybe the way it could have, and that kind of thing. So, I think that the casting of these two, cannot be overstated as far as how awesome they are. And I feel like we saw that right away in the tragedy episode, and they didn't have a lot of time together.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you didn't get like a real window into the two of them very much in Mandalorian season 2. So, so I don't think I really expected it. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they sold it right off the bat.
So good.
And I think that's the benefit of, first off, having two seasoned actors that know what they're doing, that know what they're about.
Oh yeah.
That know the characters well enough. In one case is completely inventing the character, and in the other case has been the character so fully and completely for such a long time,
and has been the character's family,
right?
Yeah, exactly. In this very weird way. Yeah, he is this. Yeah,
and
he is the Gatra.
Well, and that's one of the really interesting things that I want. I'm wondering if they're going to explore with this is his relation with the clones, and because he's building a family. And it doesn't necessarily have to, like, I think the point of having these two, I love the fact that you're bringing it up as a marriage proposal, Angela, because the point for these two is that they're going into a partnership. And this is very clearly the kind of marriage proposal that is a partnership proposal. Like, not I love you so much and I'm so enamored with you, and the fireworks and roses. And,
I can't stand to live without you. Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah. So this is clearly not that, but it's more look, you are the person that makes this thing that I'm about to do make sense, that makes the next 60 years of my life make sense. And that's an effective proposal, because that's a partnership, right? And I think the thing that they're doing well in a lot of these shows is like, the chosen family. And in this case, rather than seeing him fall into a part of a chosen family, he is going to build it, right? We see with Boba Fett, he's tried to fall into a family and hasn't had success, except with the Tusken Raiders, and he lost them. So now he's like, that's it. I'm doing this myself. I'm tired of trying to find it out there. I'm going to make it. And and she's the first one that he picks, and that's a phenomenal honor for her. You know, with as awesome as we all know this character is, it's phenomenal.
Legendary
honor for her to
Boba
be that
Fett.
one.
Yes. Yeah, and well, she is being offered something that no one else has offered her. I mean, clearly, you know, just from the way that the acting choices again, you know, and she's like, she puts up her defensive wall at this moment, right? And she kind of speaks for all those grouchy Star Wars fans, and that's when she says like, "Oh, living with the Tuskens made you soft," and that's when we get this whole, "No, it made me strong. You can only get so far without a tribe." I really think that is a message of the series, because if you think about Boba Fett before, it was, you know, Boba Fett the bounty hunter, like do it yourself, every man for himself,
right?
You know, solo. He's
that lone
alone.
wolf. Yeah,
he's alone. And now here is that same, you know, iconic lone wolf saying, "You can only get so far that way. You can't live your whole life like that." So I thought that was really like, wow, you know, because the cinematography again, like they push into his face just a little bit more before he says that, and just sitting by the fire and everything just makes it this iconic, you know, scene. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we probably all agree that that's like something that they're trying to get across with the series. So it was just a neat moment. And so after he speaks those words, then we see flashes from that post-credit Mandalorian scene where he's taking Bib's throne, and then, you know, Fennec's up there with the spatchka or whatever it is, you know, that blue stuff. And
that I love it because you can see it very clearly in that moment that she goes to drink and then like is reminded, "Don't drink that. It's like it's actually not good to drink." And, like then looks at it.
Yeah, it's kind of like
sorry, that was just hilarious. Like watching her do that, I was like, oh, that was an acting moment where she was really selling it, and they're like, no, don't. That's actually like not good for you.
yeah. It's like, you know, mouthwash or something. But then that's when Boba's back to time ends, and that's when he's congratulated on being fully healed. And honestly, like I was kind of shocked to hear that a little bit because, you know, like you were saying, Mike, like we've come to associate the storytelling of the series with those flashbacks, you know, dreams, whatever they are. And, you know, Fennec is the one who approaches then and says, what about the scars on the inside? And he's like, those take longer. So that, to me, that's saying, well, maybe we will see more. Like maybe we will see dreams or, you know, some other kind of flashback, because it's obvious that there's still more to see, you know, not just in holes in the story that we know, but also like in his development, his psyche, and just what's going on inside of him, that there's going to be more. So, you know, I don't know if you guys have any more thoughts on whether we'll see that for the rest of the series.
I was struck this time with the end of this one, the water, and because the Bacta is a water healing, and you're on a planet that's completely bone dry, and that was a very clever use of that moment to remind people that he's in a tank and he's in water, and to have that water just kind of leak away from the tank, and he's there now. He's healed, and the water's gone, but that's kind of like you get this sense almost that he's kind of this. There's something pulling him towards changing the way that Tatooine works, and I like that sort of direction with it. Almost have some very Dune vibes to it.
Interesting. Yes, Mike. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I think I'm just excited to see. You know, if well, I don't know. I mean, if episode 5. Yeah, if episode 5 doesn't have any flashbacks in it, you know, it'll be the first one. I mean, they've all had something, you know, so, and not just something, but a pretty substantial portion. I mean, it was like almost half of this episode was a flashback.
Yeah.
So most of first episode was too. So yeah, I think it seems like a good segue point to where you'd I think it would make the most sense to have the majority from here to the end of the narrative now be in the prime sort of timeline.
Right.
Especially if, well, I don't want to ruin it. We'll get to there, I guess, at the end of the episode, based on what I think has to happen this coming week. So, for example, so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move forward then. So after the exchange between Fennec and Boba, she reveals that the major domo of the mayor is definitely spilling the beans and giving as much information as possible. The mods are combing the streets for the mayor, so we can quit calling them the spy kids. They are the mods. And anyway, so Boba wants to show his face in town because power hates a vacuum. So he goes to the sanctuary, and that's where we see Rex from Star Tours dealing those cards.
Yes.
More importantly, we have Blacker Stanton in a very bad mood, downing this beverage. He's growling at a bunch of Trandoshans who seem to be banking on that card game. So guys, what was your interpretation of why he was angry? I mean, I was kind of thinking just general frustration at life. But I heard somebody say that because the Trandoshans used to enslave the Wookiees, that was maybe a reason.
Yeah, I think they run the gladiatorial pits. That's that was another thing that I think clues into it.
I wouldn't be surprised if we find out that, he was enslaved by Trandoshans. I mean, they're still giving Wookiee pelts as part of tribute, because that was confirmed in the first or second episode, whatever it was. So so that's a touchy subject for him, to be sure. I was laughing a little bit because I was looking at that thinking, this seems very familiar. I think I saw something like this go down once years ago. No, it was a little different, but it's like that moment that, like, your friend or someone, at the place you're at crosses the line and you're like, oh God, I think I need to get out of here. But the funny thing is it doesn't seem like it's the kind of place that sort of thing happens. You almost expect Garza to come and be like, was it Garza? Is that her character? Yeah. Jennifer Beals' character thing? After her to come in and be like, take it to Mos Eisley. Okay. Right. That's, they're blasting kind of stuff people down there, cutting arms off. That's where you want to go, Right.
Yeah. Well, inevitably he rips a limb off, right? It's going to grow back. And Boba approaches him, pretty much implied that Boba's hiring him at that moment, because then later at the palace, we actually see him guarding this dinner party along with the Gamorreans. This dinner party with the representatives from the three families who control Mos Espa. And this is where I think they were trying to fill in the people who haven't watched the other Star Wars, because Fennec Shand is basically retelling the backstory of, like, Jabba was on the throne and then all of that good stuff that we know already. So she's kind of filling in, giving that exposition. And she mentions that all those who were present at the dinner table were once captains under Jabba, but they left, quote unquote, the family once Bib assumed the throne. And they all tried to overthrow Bib, but they failed. So she is proposing that they continue to prosper under Boba Fett. And so he is sitting at the head of the table with all those guards, and he proposes this mutually beneficial agreement involving no tributes, and basically summarizing how the Pikes are taking control, mustering troops, and encroaching on the planet's wealth. And we have this back and forth with the guests kind of saying, well, we benefit from the spice trade, and why are you even, worthy to be daimyo? And then that's when we get the Rancor roar, right? And everybody jumps from their seats, so we can see they're sitting on top of the Rancor pit.
That was a nice move. I like that. I can't wait for the moment when he walks into town, or when he rides the Rancor into town. That's going to be, yes.
Well, I had to laugh too, because the, it's for copyright reasons. You can't have Boba Fett say that he wants to, I'm doing air quotes, people, make them an offer they can't refuse. You need to have him say, I want to offer a proposal, or make a proposal that's mutually beneficial. I'm like,
I was expecting him to go full Godfather there and say something like, yeah, you can do this, but if you sit on the sidelines, I'm coming after you next.
Yeah,
and he didn't go there, which was kind of an interesting take.
And this is, we're a family friendly show here, so I want to be very careful. I'm definitely not recommending the movie I'm about to mention, but just as far as a similarity here with this kind of brutality or the psychological fear of this, and this was a more muted version of it. But I was thinking of other gangster movies I've seen when you have this inevitable moment where the would be sort of kingpin type characters trying to assert himself. There was a years ago American Gangster with Denzel Washington, where he's in a similar situation and just in broad daylight just shoots the competition, like right on the street corner, like in front of everybody, and it's this horrific, in the sinful world we live in, these things happen, and these are seen as these terror tactics, right? These demonstrations of force. And now, what's interesting is it's these characters in this case, this is again, not being quite that brutal, but same kind of thing within this context, of he knows he needs to make the case. If he's going to really make this move, he needs them to know he's the one holding all the cards, and it seems to be getting through to them here in this scene. They all looked a little bit differently at him after those claws came up, didn't they? That was pretty intense.
Yeah. Yeah, and besides just saying the claw of the Rancor, it was really brief, but we also saw the Lep droid again, the one that had shut himself down before. So he's still there, he's working. And so everybody settles back down, sits back down, and Boba finishes by asking them all to join together and vanquish the Pike Syndicate. And not surprisingly, the families choose self-preservation over this plan. And so Boba stands up and asks them to remain neutral and says he will fight alone for the good of the planet. And to me, I almost wonder if this is like another theme of the show as a whole, because if you kind of relate this to life, right? Like oftentimes it's easy for us to choose that self-preservation these days, and over going, out of our way to help for the greater good, do something better for the planet, for the human race, for our country, whatever it is. So I don't know if you guys, what are your predictions about what this will mean, this whole scene, what this will mean going forward for the future? Like, do you think they truly will remain neutral, first of all?
I think two of them will and one won't.
Yeah, that's kind of your normal go-to. But I think too, it's interesting. I'm interested about the corner that they're writing themselves into with this, because the Pike Syndicate is much bigger than just one family on Tatooine. And even if they all band together, the Pike Syndicate is much bigger than the entire criminal force on Tatooine. So this has to be leading somewhere interesting. And I mean, I trust Filoni and Favreau at this point because they do really good stuff, and they think about this kind of thing, and they know the Pike Syndicate because they wrote Solo, and they've written these characters, this whole group into a larger existence. So I'm wondering where it's going to go. I'm intrigued.
Definitely.
And I don't, for a few reasons, if we don't go off world in the next episode, I think we definitely will by the end of the show. And that was something that struck me too, is just when you think about it, I can't think of any Star Wars ever where we weren't in space, and we haven't been at all this whole time. It's called Star Wars. And I was thinking about that. I was like, oh my gosh, like we've seen some starry nights in the desert, but I think, there's definitely some reasons to think, maybe even the next episode we might stretch our legs a little bit, but it'll be interesting. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And lastly, we get the really fantastic music kind of ramping up to like the start of a war, and Fennec and Boba are discussing war preparations, and we get that line from Fennec who says, "Credits can buy muscle if you know where to look." And then we get this shot where Boba is considering what she says, and the Mandalorian symbol on his armor is like very clearly in the shot, you know, and then we hear that Mandalorian musical motif. So, wow. What do you think it means? Are they going to go out and find all the Mandalorians they possibly can?
I think Din, personally, and I don't know where he's at, because I went back and watched the end of season 2, and I mean, I remembered it, but I you know, the last 12 times I watched it, I was just focusing in on the Luke thing, and I almost forgot about the more specific to that show conflict now between him and Bo-Katan, which is completely unresolved. I mean, it's just introduced over the Darksaber. And I started wigging out because I'd just been talking to my wife like within a week before this episode came out. And I was like, this is weird though. I said, because like there's always some kind of lightsaber in Star Wars. I mean, even if it's kind of a cheat, but you have Darth Maul just light his up just for intimidation through a hologram at the end of Solo. There's always something. And I thought, oh my gosh, because guess who has the Darksaber? So I'm fully anticipating Din with Darksaber somehow involved here. I don't know. Maybe I'm hoping too much, but that's my hope.
That's great.
I think we might be wrapping back around to some other issues here, because you know, the Mandalorians have had problems with the Pikes before. This is not a new issue, and maybe it's a final stamping out of the syndicates that have been problematic for them, and this is like the beginning of that. So I don't know. There's a lot of space, but we still don't know the timeline too, which is the other thing that's really like, we've caught up a little bit with where things are. So we know, when he was in the desert and he saw those shots and rescued Fennec, we know where that was timeline wise, but we're not sure if this is post all of the combination experience that he's had with Din, or if this is still previous to that when we end this episode. So,
well, I think it doesn't. I think it has to be post, doesn't it? Because when he gets his armor back, the next time we see him with it, and he's recently painted it. That's like when they meet up with I just lost Bill Burr's character's name.
Right.
Mayfeld. They meet up with him. And that seems to be like a tight sort of story. And then at the end of season 2, we see him in his freshly painted armor with Fennec blasting Bib and taking the throne. So I was seeing that this has to be after that, but we still don't know how long after that too. Like,
Yep. There's definitely going to be a lot of very interesting stuff. I was just wondering right now, in the sequel trilogy, do we ever see the Pikes?
I don't think so. They never really dealt with crime. Well, they did deal with crime. Yeah,
I'm just thinking planet, like background, like
they say Poe was a spice runner, but that's just a passing kind of.
Yeah, I don't think we see any of the actual beings or their armor or anything in the sequels.
Angela, I'm so glad you mentioned sequels, because I would have forgotten this otherwise. It just occurred to me, I'm pretty sure John Williams' cameo when he's the bartender in Rise of Skywalker, I think he might be a mod. I don't know.
That's true.
He's got the eye thing and stuff, and it's a couple decades later. Maybe he was one of these guys.
Hipster. He did it
before it was cool. So
yeah,
I don't know that we ever saw any live action Pikes outside of Solo, right?
I mean, you would think that, at least one or two of them would have been getting one of those drinks from John Williams, I mean, that was a pretty fancy schmancy place, and you would think that the Pikes would be around. So I don't know. I'm just wondering.
It was a very cold planet. They're kind of fishy. I don't know. Are they cold-blooded? I don't know, or how.
I don't know. They were doing stuff on Tatooine, so.
They can go extreme, yeah.
We'll see how this goes. But yeah, it's definitely, I almost think, with the guys that are in charge of this show, that they really want, if Boba Fett's going to be in a war, like, it's going to be a war. Like, it's going to be nuts to watch this go down, I don't think
it's way too much to hope for, like, because it wouldn't make sense to introduce them into the show this late, I don't think. And I don't know that they had any loyalty to him. But what about some of those bounty hunters from Empire. I just think it'd be so cool to see like Bosk and,
Yeah.
Dengar and those guys. But I mean, you saw them in expanded universe stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know. In Trandoshan connection. Now maybe there's, I don't know. Oh,
Yeah.
who knows?
Oh, so many possibilities.
IG-88.
Yeah. I was going to say, we've got the IG droids back in already with the Mandalorian stuff. So
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any other reflections, observations, comments? All right.
I think so.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, what about you guys listening? Please email us your thoughts about the Book of Boba Fett or anything Star Wars, please, at starwars@sqpn.com. Or you can find StarQuest on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Just leave a comment there, or you can tweet us at SQPN. And while you're doing so, please share the podcast. All right. So we would like to thank some special people who made this episode possible. Our patrons, including Michael T., Father Matt B., Colleen L., Mark M., and Christopher Y. And you also can join them by becoming a patron at sqpn.com/give. Thank you so much. And also, everyone can definitely help the show by leaving a review for the podcast, especially if you have Spotify on your phone, on your computer, because as we've been saying, they just introduced podcast ratings. So this is your weekly reminder. Please do leave us a rating and let us know how we're doing, but also help Secrets of Star Wars get seen by more people. And if you'd like to represent our family of finding hope in a galaxy far, far away, you can check out our merch at sqpn.com/merch. All right. Well, next week we will take a deeper dive into episode 5 of the Book of Boba Fett, chapter 5, I should say. So until next time, Thomas, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
It's been great.
And thank you also, Mike Creavey.
I wouldn't miss it.
And once again, I'm Angela Sealana. Thanks for listening to the Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.